Hi, everyone. Welcome to the SiD Scavenger Hunt session. I am Jenny Schlukebier, your talking host today, and my partner, Mary.
Hello. That's all I have to say today is
That's all you have to
hello.
say. Okay,
Welcome,
hello.
welcome, welcome.
Welcome, everyone. And it is a beautiful day in Minnesota, at least in the Twin Cities. I hope it is in everywhere else in Minnesota. Maybe people can chime in. And Mary, how is it in Georgia?
Oh my gosh. Fall has arrived. It's like
Okay.
72 and sunny today.
Fall is 72, you guys.
Yeah,
Um,
love it.
nice. All right, so welcome to the SID scavenger hunt session. We are we did give a tidbit in the description that this is something we did at the Summer Institute. So perhaps you came and you still want to do it again. We've tweaked a few things, but a lot is the same. This is just a chance we're throwing out questions to you that you might get from a manager or oh, I'm going to turn off my video. I tend to do that just for um, bandwidth, but also so I don't see my own face so much. Questions you might get from your manager or community ed director or just coworker about your students, who they are, your results, your staff, whatever, and give you a chance to see if you can go find that info in SID. So a few little other intro slides here before we get rolling. So one thing we do suggest is that for this session, open another tab in your browser and log into SID so you're ready to go over and you can flip over to another tab or another browser and look for data in your SID system. Then I'm going to list off some scenarios, some common questions, and then see if you can go find that info. I do always we set a timer for about a minute for most of these questions. We did two before, but that was kind of long. And I tell myself I'm going to stop talking while I have you go look for the answers, but I always talk through. But anyway, so we'll have a little bit of time for you to go. You don't have to pay attention to my gibbering jabbering at that time and go look for answers and come back and we'll usually have you chat them in. So we can just kind of see where people are, see if you found what you're looking for, and other kinds of questions. Oh, and number 4 here on the screen. For most of these reports, if I ask for a question about what was your data, um, how many students did you have, blah, 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 last year? So you're going to want to use last year's data because this year we're only partway through the year. So for when I ask for full year data, you're going to want to look for 23-24 program year. Unless I specify that we're looking at this year's info. And that's when we're running reports. There's a few questions on here that aren't an actual report. They're just somewhere in SID. You might find the info. Okay. And a couple other quick tidbits. So many of the reports, when you are logged into SID, you have the tabs across the top, and the reports tab is the page that you'll probably go to most today when you're looking for reports to run to find information. And that is a really, really long page. We list a lot of reports, and this page is divided into little sections, like the top says attendance reports, and then we got a bunch of reports in there, outcome reports, etc. So sometimes when I give the answer to what report you should run, I describe it as being within the, say, attendance report section of the report tab, and that's what I'm referring to. And finally, I always just like to remind people, this really doesn't have to do with today's session, but when we go back a second, you also, on every SID page, all the way to the right, there's a button that says Help. And when you click on that Help button, you're going to go to this tab. And this is our Help Center. And this, if you ever have a question about SID, and how do I do this? How do I do that? Whether it's a report or some detail about a student, or how do you make classes in a certain way. Most of the answers, I think, do appear here in our help. There's a search bar up here. You can type in your question and it'll pop up with the various articles we have on that topic, or you can just go into one of the sections, students, for example, and find all kinds of help articles. And then also the first box says SID training and support. Anytime we do a training, and webinars have been really nice because we can then upload our webinars. So if you went to a session, you really liked it, but you forgot some details, you can go there and you'll find links to the actual presentation. We usually have PDFs of the session, and if there's help articles associated, you'll find those there. So you can go there today and you'll find trainings from the last couple of years. And in addition to all kinds of other training materials we have there, help videos for all the various topics in SID. So please utilize our help center. And if all else fails, or if you need info from us, you can always email us at sidsupport@literacymn.org. All right, so let's go to our first question. The first question, we didn't get to this one when we did this in the Summer Institute, so we're going to start off with it. How many staff are considered currently active in your program? I kind of worded that funny. How many staff are currently considered active in your program, meaning like today when I say current? Okay, so how many are active in your program? How would you go about answering this question? I'm going to give you a minute to run off. I keep saying run off, but to use your mouse to go to another tab. And how would you answer that question? How many staff are currently considered active in your program? I see we got a few answers already coming in the chat. Oh, I'm supposed to be quiet. I'm gonna be quiet. We have a lot of answers. Keep them coming. Great. Everyone's feeling pretty confident. They found a number that represents how many staff they have currently active. I keep talking. All right, before we get to the answer, where did you look to find the answer? Is anybody willing to explain what they looked at in order to get this answer? Was there a report you ran? What did you do? Anybody who answered? We got a lot of answers here. We got some 15, 10, 19, 36, 5. Anybody want to say where they found their answer? Reports, staff contact list, very nice. Under staff on this specific subsite, yep. You go to staff, make sure it's active. Oh, very good. Okay. We've got what I like about the answers, we got a few different answers, which is good because in SiD, many things can be found in a couple different ways. And this is exactly one of those types of topics. So here's what I think is the quick and easiest way to find how many staff are considered active, like right now today. So if you are in SiD and you go to the staff tab, and then you have your grid, what we call a grid, your list of all your staff. You go all the way to the right column. It says active, checked or unchecked. And checked are those people who are currently active. And active for a staff means that they were given an entry date when you first made their record as a staff person, and they have not been exited on their history item. Okay, so the second bullet here says by selecting the checked people, this will find the staff whose program entry or exit status history, based on their entry and exit status history. Okay, so if you do that, your list is going to shrink down to just those who are currently active based on their history item. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll even see a number that counts them up for you. If you have a small program, you can probably count them up yourself right there on the first page. But if you have a bigger program, it's going to a quick number down there. Now, before I show you the other option, or I'll talk through the other option. How many people look at this number and they think, that seems a little big. We don't really have that many staff current. Does anybody run across that issue? We're not going to get into it today, but it's important that you, no, that's good. Yes, okay, good. That's good too. It's important that you keep your staff records up to date. So if you have staff who still show up as looking like they're active, that's going to make some of your reports about staff look like you have way more staff than you do. So if you have staff who are showing up as active and you look at their name and you go, oh, they haven't been here for a long time, you should click on them, go to their history page, and give them an exit date, probably of last year. We have more info about that. If you have any questions on how to make sure your staff don't appear active, if they no longer are working with your program, we can help you clean that up. But it's important to get that cleaned up as more and more as there's more reports that you run at the end of the year telling the state how many staff you have, that kind of thing. You want it to be accurate. Great. And the other way that people have mentioned doing that is going to the staff contact list. So on the report tab, I don't have a screenshot of this, but on the report tab, there's also a staff contact list, and it's going to run a list, names, addresses, that kind of thing for your staff who are, and it uses the same designation. If they are considered active based on their history screen, saying that they have an entry date and they don't have an exit date yet. Okay, for today. Now, we've got some bonus questions associated with this topic. How would you look up how many staff were active last program year? So the distinction here is not how many are active today, but how many were active at some point during the whole last program year from July 1st, 2023 until June 30th, 2024. How would you find that number? So this screen, the staff screen that has the grid, that's going to show you who's active actually today. So if somebody was working with you in August, September, and October, and then they quit at the beginning of November, and you gave them an exit date, they will not appear as active on this screen because they're not active today. Now it's November. But there are reports that will find people active in a certain date range. Okay, does anybody have an idea how you might find that group? Table 7, yes, Table 7 will count that up, great. An associated question, and the next question on this box here, how many staff that were active last year completed their certified CASAS training in the last 5 years? Are y'all familiar with this report? Because yes, Table 7 works, thank you. But there's another one. It's a new report that just had to be turned in this last summer. Well, there's staff histories. Thank you, Ruth. Staff history has all kind of info. We also have a new report. It's called the Staff Required Training Report. Okay. Yeah, staff histories is a really good one. That gives you all kinds of information about all the staff in your program, and you can toggle it about whether they are active in a certain date range. And then we have this new report called the Staff Required Trainings, which it runs for a date range. So if you were to look at that right now and run it for last year, you would put in last year's date range, last program year. If you can select whether you want to find those who are active during that time or if you want everyone. So for this purpose, you would select those who are active. And then you're going to run this report. It gives you a nice total of how many were considered active sometime during last year. And then to answer that second question, this report tells you how many of those staff have on their record whether they did the CASAS implementation or recertification training, and it puts the date of that training on the report. Okay, and it also does the table implementation training. It has information about the ABE Foundations training. So this is a great way to get a snapshot of how many of your staff were active during that time period and whether they are up to date on the various required trainings. This was a new report last summer that the state MDE folks started requesting. Are you all familiar with this report? Any yeses out there? Remember this one? I think a couple people mentioned it, I see. Good. And there's one for volunteers as well. And I have the same question. So if you look at this report, does it have way more staff than you think it should? If that's true, you should be going in and cleaning out the teacher's records of those who are no longer working in your program. And we're going to keep reminding people to do that as the year goes on, because I think this is an ongoing task that we were always focused on students and we're less focused on making sure we have every detail correct about staff. So this is a good year to kind of remind ourselves to clean up staff records. All right. Changing gears real quick. Now we're going to talk about students. Similar question. How many students are currently enrolled in classes at your site? I'm going to do a minute. Currently, the keyword, today. How many are currently enrolled in classes at your site? Jennifer says, I don't see the ability to choose subsites. You're right. This is for an overall whole site. Sorry, Jennifer. For at least for there's two ways you can do this, but you could use the student contact list, as Ruth said. I think that one can sub down to subsites. The quick and easy way that we'll see in about 25 seconds will be your whole site, and you won't do subsites. How many students are currently enrolled? Does anybody want to type in a number of what they've found? Say you. Nice. 1,260, 116. I love that we get to see the breadth of the different sizes of programs as well when we answer this question. Woo, Hub Center. Okay, let's take a look. Somebody say you, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. did give the right answer. The first answer that I was going to highlight anyway, um, is yes, very similar to the staff one. So if you look at the student tab and you have the grid of all your students, it's going to show every single student has ever been in your program, which is going to be a pretty huge number. Um, and if you want to just see who has a current schedule right now today, you're going to do that same thing. You're going to go over to this. This column is called scheduled, not active. And you put check, and it's going to show only the students who have a current class on their schedule. Even if they're only in DL, that's going to show them as active if they're in a DL class. But it's a pretty, if you're keeping your class lists up to date, this should be a pretty good way to see how many students you currently have enrolled. Great, everyone's seeing their numbers, it looks like. And again, this just means for today. How many are currently enrolled today? And then somebody did mention the contact list. You can do the same thing with on the report tab, the contact list for students, which gives, phone, email, addresses, all that stuff. That's going to also just find the people with a current schedule. But this one's in my opinion, this is quick and easy. Contact list takes a second to run, depending on how big your program is. Great. All right. Now, while kind of looking, we have another question. While you're still looking at the same screen, I guess I gave a hint how you might answer it. But we wanted to talk about some features on this screen, the grid screen. Since July 1st, how many students have enrolled in your program for the first time ever? Like one of their first enrollment ever in your program was sometime between July 1 and now. Do you know how you might find that piece of information? This is really the only place you can find it, I think. You're like, oh, how many people enrolled for the first time with us since July 1? And I gave you a hint that it would be on that same screen. It's not a report, it's this screen. I like the timer continues. Any answers? Anyone have some thoughts? Anybody have some answers? Last hours, you could do last hours, but 858, 0. Okay, intriguing. I think this is a tricky one. So if nobody knows, Ruth, you're close. First entry column, yes. Okay. So if you're looking at that, the first entry column, if you're looking at that screen on the student tab, shows all the students again. These little boxes at the top of each column, probably all the time, you go to the last name and you type in someone's last name and it narrows the list down to all the last names that start with B or whatever you typed. Well, you can also look for something, you can filter things in different ways. So if you click the little, looks like a key next there, and you select is greater than or equal to, and then you type a date in there, it's going to find only the students who have their first entry greater than or equal to whatever date you typed there. You could do that for last hours too, if you want to see only the students who've attended in the last few weeks for some reason. But if someone were to ask you, okay, how many brand new students have we had in the last 2 weeks? You could use this first entry. And it's gathering that information from when you do an intake on a student, it gives them that entry date, their first ever entry into your system. And that's the date that you see here. So it's kind of a fun thing, but using that same way of searching, this little key and then other options pop down, is kind of helpful to find things. You can also look for names when you're using a text one and you click the key. They might have, instead of just the letter starts with, they might have contains. So let's say you're looking for classes on the classes grid that looks just like this, and you want to find a class that has the word GED in it, but that doesn't start with the word GED. You can click the key and it's going to have contains. And then, so there's a little bit more robust ways of filtering these lists with these boxes. And we just wanted to highlight that. Kind of fun. Okay, Jennifer, great. You found some. It wasn't 0. 142. Excellent. Cindy, that's a lot of people who've just started in the last few months. And Ruth, holy buckets. All right, let's move on. I know this session goes really fast and we ran out of time last time, so I need to move. Okay, did your student, totally changing gears again, did your student hours increase from 2023, so 2 years ago, to 23-24 last year? And at the bottom, I have a little extra credit question. If your hours did increase, what was the percentage of increase? And if you can't remember how to do percentages, we have a little link to a calculator for doing percentages, and Mary put that link in the chat as well. So, did your student hours increase from the 2023 program year to the 23-24 program year? This is a report, and it might take a little bit longer to run, especially if you're a big program. It's counting a ton of data. Yes, we already have an answer. Your program increased. I have a feeling most programs have. Oops, I'm going to be quiet. Okay, 7 seconds. Anyone else? Are the reports running slow? Anybody else have an answer? Did your hours increase from the 22-23 program year to the 23-24 program year? Can you find that info? We've got one answer so far, yes. Are people waiting for, oh, another yes, another yes. Excellent. Let's take a look at the report. So now we're going to go to the reports tab that I mentioned at the very beginning, and there is a report in that attendance report section near the first chunk of reports. This one is called Site 5-Year Attendance Report. And this will show you month by month the attendance hours in the current year and the previous 4 years. So you're able to look at last year's and compare it to the previous years. And you can see this example here shows a gain, 115,000 compared to 92. And you have a little bit of a decrease of 1%, but you used your calculator and found your percentages. That's good. So if you did have an increase, do you know what percentage? Joshua is a 25% increase. That's good. It's similar to this one, this example we have. I think last time we did this, I think it was a math teacher who chimed in with an easy way to remember this, how to do a percentage. You take the amount of change and you divide it by the original amount. So we have a cheat sheet down here. So an example, we have 115,000 the second year and 92 the first year. So that difference, so the amount of change was 23,000. So take that 23,000 and divide it by, or take the big number and divide it by the little number, the change over the original number of hours that year. And we got 25% in this example, 25.5. And the nice thing about this report also is obvious. You can look at month by month as well. So even if the year hasn't completed yet, you can look, okay, already this year, my May is bigger than last year's May, my June is bigger than last year. So you could even just compare the first 4 months to last year's first 4 months. Or use that calculator that Mary linked to in the chat. Okay. All right, moving along here. Wow, big growth over there, I think in Osseo, right? Is that Dean? Okay, this is an easy one. I think it's an easy one. Yes, Dean. What distance learning, I'm totally changing gears. What distance learning DL platforms were used in your program last year? Maybe you didn't do DL, so I guess you can just sit and enjoy your afternoon soda or whatever you might be snacking on. So what distance learning platforms were used in your program last year? Maybe you just know because you're the DL administrator. If you found some answers, start chiming those in. And if you did use a handful of distance learning platforms, which one had the most hours? Type in 2 of the DL platforms that you found. Oh, time's up. Aztec. Ooh, somebody's got a bunch. Burlington, Paraeducator, MobiMax, Townsend, Northstar. All right, what was your top usage ones, Joshua? Burlington and Read Theory. Burlington, a lot of Burlington. That's good. Aztec, North Star, Burlington. Burlington was a biggie in a few places. Moby Max. Okay, so the answers will be found in reports that are on the report tab. There's a couple different ones. The first one is something that shows, it's called the daily and monthly attendance in DL classes. And this is kind of a lot of detail, but it's going to list the name of the class, the DL platform, and the hours per month and total number of hours. So it doesn't group your platforms together, but it lists them each separately by class. So you can glance at this one, you can see Eli's used a lot, Con in a couple classes. But we also have another report. This is new as of last summer. And it's called just Distance Learning Platform Hours. And this one just gives you, if you just want to know how many hours are being earned in these platforms, it lists a nice bar chart and shows you how many hours, the name of the platform down here, and how many hours. So this program, the most hours were in the Eli platform, then MobyMax, then typing.com, etc. And then the second page of this report just has them listed in a nice little table as well. Right. That's good to know. You know, if your program's thinking about which DL platforms they want to keep or keep working with or whatever, it's a good way to get a glance of which ones are the most used. All right. Switching gears again. Which EFL, otherwise known as Educational Functioning Level, which EFL group had the highest post-testing rate in the 23-24 NRS program year? I see we have a question over there, Shauna, about DL. You could send us that question separate after the program or after the session. Okay, I'm going to start the timer. This one I gave you a little bit more time because this report might take a little while to run, and I don't think it's difficult, but you have to know what you're looking for. Which educational functioning level group had the highest post-testing rate in the 23-24 NRS program year in your program? I'm going to be quiet for a sec, for real this time. We're getting down to a minute. Has anybody found the answer? Chime in as soon as you find one. We'll know if we're headed in the right direction. Still loading. It's running slow. Okay, that was my fear, especially when a bunch of us are on there. All right, we got an answer, ESL level 5. Bigger programs. I know Cindy's from a big program. Josh, I'm trying to remember what program you're from. A big one. Are you corrections? Because Harmony, that's a pretty big program. Right? Has it loaded yet for anybody else? Any smaller programs out there have theirs load correctly? Or not correctly, I mean, so far. Can you find ESL level 5? Also, you know what? I feel like that was the answer last time we did this. There was a few with ESL 5. It must be a group that sticks around, does their testing. All right. Okay. So the report that has this information, I think there's just this one place you can find this, is on the report tab, in the outcome section, the level gain, MSG, and post-test rates report. And this is a report that's kind of really particularly valuable at the end of the program year. Your manager will be sending this to the state. You run this, you usually look at how many MSGs you have, which is this final column, whether they're level gains, whether they're GEDs, whatever. But for this question today, we are looking at the percentage of students who got a post-test in that group. Okay, so if you haven't looked at this report very much, you'll see that This counts up all the students in the different educational functioning levels. So ABE1, they had 45 students, this many hours. 64% of those students got a post-test. Okay, so I'm looking through what is my highest percentage. Oh, ours is ESL 5 too in our example. We have a few ABEs 1 and 2. That's good. ABE 2. So you can see this one, 72% was the highest, and that was for their ESL level 5 group. Um, it is often the case, it's not a one-for-one comparison, but it's often the case, the group that has the highest post-test rate also usually often has the highest level completion, MSG rate. Okay. And that makes sense because people aren't going to show gains if they haven't been post-tested. So it's good to keep your eyes on this group, this column, to see if you're effectively getting all your students post-tested. Okay. This table also has this example has a couple examples of why sometimes numbers, stats, percentages aren't super useful because when the number is super tiny, um, for their level gains amounts, they only have 3 students. Um, 3 of them got the GED, so they have 100% level gains. So when your numbers are so small, percentages get a little silly. So you kind of keep that in mind, especially if you have a small program. But nonetheless, the post-test rate, you also have an overall post-test rate. So in addition to looking at each level, you can, if you're a small program, you might just want to look at your overall program post-test rate just to see how you're doing. Are you getting your students post-tested? Another ABE1 group with the high post-test rate. Great. Seems like probably everyone got that loaded. We're able to successfully run the report. Bonus question by still looking at that table. What number of participants earned either a GED or a high set in your program last year? Let's just take a quick look. So for last year, we're looking at last year, not this year. You have the MSG 2 column, which will count up how many people got either the GED or high set. So people have 23. Oh, this example we have has 23. 16, 43. That's big. That's good. Yes. So you can take a look at this column. If you are a program who mostly serves lower level ESL students, you probably won't have anyone in that category, and that's totally fine. 220. Holy buckets. Is that correction, Sarah? That's a big program. Yeah. You guys get a lot of GEDs. It's really great. And then we have another report that you can find in the reports tab that's called the MSG report. And what that does, it's not as big and busy as this gigantic level gain report. It's just a small little quick report that shows you just how many students got the level gain for testing, how many students got the GED, how many students got high set, and if you have any of the MSG 3s or 4s, it'll count those. And then you can click the plus sign and you can see who those students are. You can hone right in on that list of students. It's harder to find those students in this table because even if you click the plus sign, all your students are there, and trying to zoom in and find which one was the GED students is tricky. So you can go to that MSG report, and it just, like I said, just focuses right in on the people who got the various gains. That's your screen, Dean. We usually take the name off the program when we do examples, screenshots. Very good. Okay, moving quickly. Oh, 10-minute warning I just got. Jeez, Louise. What percentage of students did not become participants? I gave this a long time. I'm going to shorten it. What percentage of students did not become participants? I'm shortening this answer because we're running out of time, but this is a hard one. I mean, the amount of time I'm giving you to go find it. This is a little bit more of a tricky, it's not tricky, but it's, take some more. Oh, good question. What percentage of students did not become participants? What year? I was last year. Although you could run it for this year if you want to count, but since the year is not done, it's kind of like how many. But you could compare this year so far. How many of your students so far this year have not become participants? Or you could look at last year. All right, let's take a look at the answer. Okay, the hint is the conversion rate report. It's on the same, it's on the report tab and it's underneath the level gain reports. I think it's like there's level gain for DL, level gain for with demogs, and then there's one called conversion rate report, which is quite similar to the level gain report. There's fewer columns. We give less detail on this report, but there's more parameters. So you can put in different hour ranges. Okay. So I think it'll default and it'll run for all your students, whether they have zero point 0.5 hours all the way to a crazy maximum. So it's going to run all your students. So in that way, it's different than the level gain report. The level gain report, the previous one, only looks at participants. Those are people with 12 hours. This report, when you first run the default, it's going to run for all your students. So even enrollees, even people who have no test, and there'll be a row that says no level. So it's going to be everybody. So you can run that and you'll get your full number of all your students who came through the door and started a little bit of ABE programming. Then you can narrow down the parameters and say, I'm just going to search now for those with, and write down your number after you ran it the first time. Write that down. And then run it again and only search for those who have somewhere between 0 and 11.9 hours. Because if they have 12 hours, they're a participant. We want to find out who didn't become a participant. So we're going to look for just those students who are somewhere between 0 and slightly less than 12 hours. So run that report again with that as your parameters. And then that report's going to show you how many students had fewer than 12 hours. So how many didn't become a participant? They didn't get as far as 12 hours in your program. And then you take that number, and you divide it by how many total students you had, and you're going to see a percentage of how many. That you just have to do on a piece of paper or in your head or on a calculator. So how many of your students had fewer than 12 hours? How many total students did you have last year? And divide that number and you'll get your percent who did not become participants. And this is something programs I think want to be paying attention to because you want to, if you're a program, a lot of students don't even quite make it to 12 hours. Is there something going on? Do you need to work on some orientation? Do you need to do some follow-up with students really in those early days of them being a student to make sure they continue, that kind of thing. So 32%. To be honest, I'm not even sure what exactly would be a high number or a low number. But I think the goal is to get your students to be participants to reach that 12 hours and beyond. So, and of course, there are students who come for just a few hours. There are students who come for maybe 5 hours of math prep because they're getting ready to do the GED. That happens for sure. Okay, did people at least get a chance to see the report and run it? Any questions on how you might make that calculation? If not, I'm going to move on. One last thing. There's other things you could do. You could also just look at, I just want to find all my students have 40 or more hours because you can't post-test people unless they've been around for 40 hours. So how many of your students stick around to 40 hours? That's another thing you could do when you're looking at this report. Okay, changing gears to something very easy. All right, does everybody catch your breath from that last one, from doing any percentages? All right, what are the top 3 birth countries for students in your program? Oops, let me start the timer. I'm going to give you just a few. What are the top 3 birth countries for students in your program? If you think about this, asking about sort of the demographics of your students, what report might have that information? Great, Somalia, Ecuador, Mexico. The top 3 birth countries for students in your program. I'm going to move to the next screen. Keep looking for it while I talk about the answer. So we do have a report on the report tab in the demographics section. It's called the program summary report. If you run that report, again, this might take a little while because it does calculate all the hours of the students, and I think it calculates their levels too. So maybe not levels. Anyway, it's crunching through a lot of info, so it does take a bit. When you run that report, the first page has pretty generic information about different age ranges and their work status, etc. The third page of this report, so you got to use these little arrows. The third page lists off all the countries of origin of your students in population order. So this program, the highest number are from the United States, second highest number from Laos, third is Mexico. I see a few more answers: Mexico, Laos, Ethiopia. Um, and I think there's a table right next to it that shows languages. So it's kind of interesting info to look at about your students. Now, there's also a line that might appear that says unreported because this is not a required data. So not everyone answers this question, but I think most programs get this information from most of their students. While we're at it, US, Vietnam, and China. Nice. Someone even pasted in their percentages. Okay, bonus questions. It's going to be from the same report, so it won't take you any time to run it. What age group is the largest age group in your program? And how many students are homeless? And if you were at the morning program, you know that that's one of the barriers to employment questions. So, and I showed you then in the session we did at 10 o'clock how you find that answer. And it's on this report that you just ran, your program summary report. Anybody have any answers? 25 to 44 is your highest age group. Yes. Okay. Like I said, it's the same report. It's the program summary report. Page 1 has the age ranges. Page 1 also has, I think, racial and ethnic demographics. Work. No, work is on page 2. It's a bunch of data on the first page, including the age group, which I asked about. And then the second page, we have a new table that shows you how many students you have with the various barriers to employment. This example here shows 15. Now, some of you might not have homeless. If you have no students who answered that question as homeless, you're going to not even have this line on your report, page 2. But you'll probably have cultural barriers, some English language learners, that kind of thing. It's on page 2. It's brand new to page 2. Yeah, 25 to 44 is by and far the largest age group, I think, in every single program. Less than 1% homeless. Yes. Good. I think we have 2 minutes. So I don't even know if we have time for this question, but how can you know which test is a student's pretest for their current program year? We're going to take a quick look. Oh, you had a higher number for disability, 1.26 for homeless. Great. I'm glad everyone is finding that answer. Great, Lisbeth. I'm going to skip the timer on this one. Okay, if you look at a student's summary screen, their name and address is usually over here. This little box up here shows their most recent test. It shows if they have a gain. But also there's a column, I don't know if people pay much attention to, it says pre-test. And if this student had a previous test, it's going to show you the date that SiD considers their pre-test for this year. So that helps you narrow down which test was their pre-test for this program year in math. And if they also did reading, it was the same date. Then you can go to the assessments tab, and then that's where you'll see all the tests they ever took. You can be like, oh yeah, the one they took on August 1st is the one that's considered their pre-test. Good. Cindy said the summary screen. Charlene asked what percentage of states looking for social security number. I think it's 70%. Is they're hoping that we get 70% of our students social security number info. That's a great question, Charlene, and it's something we should be always remembering to talk about. But anyway, the student screen is where you can find information about what test SiD is considering to be their pre-test in each of their subject areas for this program year. You know, it's always going to look back to which was their last test before this program year started, or if they're a new student this year, it's going to be their first test this year. And sometimes it's hard to like just glance and look at and figure out, but you can look on their summary screen. This pre-test column will tell you the date of the test, and then you can look at their assessment tab and scroll through all their tests and find out which one that was. And I think it's 1:45 and I have to end. So we did it again. We didn't quite make it through. I was close this time. So I just want to get to the, Marissa put a link in the chat, which is the agenda for the Zoom link. So if you're going to another session, you can find the links there. You're welcome, everybody. I'm glad this was an enjoyable session. It always happens so fast. I need to start off fast talking right away. Um, if you have any questions about anything that we talked about, definitely email us. Um, we always like to get back to people as quick as we can. And enjoy this lovely day. Enjoy your last session. I think the next one's the last one of the day. Um, thank you all. Yeah, Jason, we will have, you can go to our help page and in a couple days and click on that training. If you saw that, if you remember that training um, button on our help page, and then we will have the links to the slides there. And the slides are also for this conference, the Spark conference, there was the folder that you could access as a participant. And I believe for sure our PDF slides are up there too. Hope that
And
all makes
here's that
sense.
link for the participant folder.
Here's the participant folder. If you click there, you'll find the PDF of the slides from today.
All right. Thank you so
Right.
much.